All right, as we start this video off, a couple things. First, it's May 22nd as I record this. I am wearing a hoodie. What is going on? I think it is like 53 degrees outside. It's supposed to stay this way. It's been this way for like 4 days. It's supposed to be this way another 4 days. It is late May. What is going on? Let's get this thing warm up in here. Let's actually have summer. Can't complain too much because we had some warm days throughout March, throughout April, even in early May. So I can't complain too much, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about complaining. Hey, my second question for you is, did you recognize the player in the picture? Did you recognize the player in the picture? Because that's the guy we're going to be talking about today. But I didn't want to just take a quick picture of who he was or who he currently is coaching for the Detroit Lions. I wanted to find him as a player, and I wanted to find it with the old roots, and those old roots to Dan Campbell. And in this one, we're going to be talking about Kelvin Shepherd. We've spent time talking about what kind of a defensive coordinator we think he's going to be. Me and Chris have talked highly about him. There's no doubt about that. And if you're new to this channel, me and my buddy Chris, we've been doing Lions content for at least 4 years now. It's hard to keep track at this point. So thankful for the community that we formed on here. Like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff if you like what we're doing and you haven't done that yet. But let's talk about Kelvin Shepherd and his ascent. It started in 2015, believe it or not, when Dan Campbell was the interim coach for the Miami Dolphins. That's why you have a Kelvin Shepherd Miami Dolphins picture on the thumbnail. And it was what happened. One of the cool things that he did was he had an open door policy, Dan Campbell did, as a head coach back in 2015 when he was the interim head coach. And it would give players the opportunity to come in and talk with him. And Kelvin Shepherd was one of those players that constantly did that. And then after he got done playing, his last season as a football player was in 2018 with the Detroit Lions. It wasn't long when Dan Campbell got his first head coaching job in 2021. He said to Kelvin Shepherd, get over here. You're going to come coach with me. And he was ready to do it. And then it started happening really, really fast. He went from being the outside linebackers coach to the linebackers coach. And then Dan Campbell had this to say. He said, I've always believed that Shep could be an outstanding coach. About 2 years ago, I just felt like, man, this guy will be ready to be a coordinator sooner than later. That is the next step. This is the next step. Without telling him, nothing was ever promised. I felt really good about that. Like, he's ready. He's ready. And so he went from linebackers coach to DC in this past offseason. We know he replaced Aaron Glenn. But this is the kind of thing that I think makes great coaches. I don't mean that this is what makes Kelvin Shepherd a great coach. We're going to get into why he can be a great coach. I'm talking about Dan Campbell. And then I'm going to talk about why I think Shep can be an even better coach than Glenn as a defensive coordinator. But Dan Campbell has the ability to, yes, listen to other people in the room. It's amazing. He really does have a cohesive effort, both him and Brad Holmes. But he has the trust in himself to make the hard decisions. You bring in a guy to be your assistant or your outside linebackers coach who has never coached football. Even if you look at his track record with Kelvin Shepherd, it doesn't say that he coached in college. It doesn't say that he was even in high school, right? What it says is Detroit Lions 2018 as a player. As a coach, it started in 2021 with the Detroit Lions. Now, he was for 1 year in 2020, he was the director of player development at LSU. He was. But that's a little different. All right, I want to look at people that aren't Dan Campbell and see what they had to say. Another one was defensive line coach Casey Rogers, who we brought over from Tampa Bay, and outside linebackers coach Dave Correo. They coached Shepherd when he played for the Dolphins. By the way, doesn't that say something about these two men too? That these are guys who have coached Shepherd and now they're working under him with complete humility. I mean, isn't that fantastic? Let's see what they had to say about him. We're going to do a lot of reading of a couple of quotes. I love this. All right, it first starts with Rodgers. He says, I remember coaching Shep as a player. To see him now running the meetings with the coaches, running the meeting with the players, it is just the leaps and bounds. I always thought he was a smart player. To see the growth in him over the years, the way he runs our meetings, the structure of our defenses, the way he talks to the player, I'm really impressed. He says we go all the way back to 2014 when he was a player for us in Miami, and you see him even back then walk in the door. There's a leadership quality. Isn't that what Detroit's about with their coaches and their players? Leadership. There's an approach, a professionalism to how he comes to the job, and that rubs off on the other guys around him, said Correo, an assistant linebackers coach in Miami when Shep was there too. We saw it again when he came here in 2018, coming in as a role player. He wound up starting a couple of games for us, and that bled into how he coaches. You guys see how the linebackers room has been run the last couple of years. The intensity, the demands, the detail. I think now what we're going to see is that's going to spread to the whole defense. When you're around him, he has that quality that the guys gravitate to. And I think the players are going to perform for him as well. He's not just a guy who's grown up into a defensive coordinator role. He's also a guy who's taken a young player similar to him, now a young coach, and groomed him to be a better coach. Sean Dion Hamilton. You remember that? Isn't that crazy? He came to the Detroit Lions. He played 4 years in the league, and in his final season in 2021, prior to his retirement, Hamilton spent training camp with the Lions in 2022. He didn't know it, but Shepherd Campbell had different plans for him. So he says, all right, fine, I'll retire, and I will accept an assistant coaching position. And now, since 2022, you've had Shep teaching Sean Dion Hamilton, another guy, that it's like, where is this coming from? And I often wonder to myself, as our coaching staff continues to turn over, where are we going to find all these good coaches that can come in and replace? And the reality is, yes, you're going to go to the outside and get the Casey Rogers to come in. That's going to happen. That's fantastic. You're also going to have to continue to develop them from seemingly nowhere. And now you have Shep that is the defensive coordinator, and you have a guy that's been working with him for the last 3 years that knows exactly what he's looking for, and now he's running the linebacker room. And both guys were similar. You can't rely fully on athleticism linebackers that just found a way to make it in the league. And Sean Dion Hamilton was extremely complimentary about how much Shepherd has helped him. He said, he helped me out tremendously. He said, I think he's probably one of the better coaches that I've ever had the chance to play for as a player. And once you start working for him and picking his brain even more, you realize, man, this guy's really sharp. He's really smart. Who does that sound like? That sounds like Dan Campbell. And I can fit a coaching staff with as many Dan Campbell's as humanly possible. I'll take it all day, every day. And Dan Campbell talked about it. We've talked about it on this channel about how Shep is going to look more at it from the front seven. And then you're going to have guys that have been on the back end, right, that have been around the block, like Deshae Townsend, right, who actually interviewed for the DC job for the San Francisco 49ers. They're going to be able to help him from there. They're going to make life easier for him. Deshae Townsend, safeties coach Jim O'Neill, right? Jim O'Neill has been a defensive coordinator. So, it's one of those things where we have surrounded him with a ton of veteran experience. The youngest coach in there is a guy who's worked with him for 3 years. And then you have the vets on the defensive line. You have a veteran coach. You have veteran coaches in the secondary that are going to be able to help him. And I think here's the main difference that you get. Aaron Glenn did something that is not easy to do. It is not easy to be a fantastic player and then be a fantastic coach. I've seen a lot of mediocre to role players become fantastic coaches. You don't see a ton of superstar players become superstar coaches. All right? That's because it's hard to relate to everything. And you could see that with Aaron Glenn. It was this is how I played cornerback, so this is how you're going to play cornerback, and this is how the defense is going to respond to how you play cornerback. Whereas I think with Shep, it's going to be, I needed to find a way to be effective no matter the situation, because no team was ever going to cater a defense at all around what he could do. He wasn't that good. He was good enough to play and be worthwhile for multiple teams, but he also is going to realize, like, you know what? Sometimes we'll have the right personnel to do certain things, and sometimes we won't. And we do have good personnel to run that Aaron Glenn type of defense. Here's the thing that I think would happen when you look last year, all right, from weeks 1 to 13 for the Detroit Lions. They ranked in the top 10 in scoring defense, yards per game allowed, rushing yards per game allowed, goal-to-goal efficiency, red zone efficiency, third down conversion rate, defensive success rate, and defensive EPA per play. A lot of that time was without Derek Barnes, Aiden Hutchinson, and Davenport. But then they fell off a cliff when they lost Carlton Davis. Their what? Corner. I don't think you are going to have a guy like Shep who you are going to rely on one player at one position so much, especially when that one player at that one position is probably your fourth or fifth best defensive player in the first place. Shepherd is going to be able to have, how do I want to put this? More wherewithal of the defense as a whole, and he's going to have a better idea of how to fit the defense to the players, because as a player, he had to find a way to fit the defense. That's the way I look at it, rather than just relying on just being intense and a stud. All right, Lions found a guy hiding in plain sight, however you want to say it. I really feel good about what Shep's going to do on the defensive side of the ball. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.